This is Rachel Dworkin from the Chemung County Historical Society. Today is July 11th, 2023, and I am here interviewing...
My name is Oliver Lindblad, and Finnish name is Olavi. And that's when I was in grade school. All the 8 years I was Olavi.
Okay. So you are going to be 102 this year.
December 8th, I'll be 102. Not born 1921.
Okay. So you were saying that you went by your Finnish name in elementary school. Where did you attend elementary school?
Van Etten.
In Van Etten?
Van Etten, New York.
Okay. So how big was the school at that time?
Well, we probably had about 15 students. And there was only Laura Seikonen and I in the first grade. They didn't have kindergarten those days. She was 2 years older than I. And she skipped some years ahead, so I was all alone in the grade for a while. But then the Mattinens moved from Wilkes-Barre to Van Etten, and there were 3 girls, so 2 of them were twins, and they were in my grade then. So then I had 3 in my grade.
Okay. So what was Van Etten like in the 20s and 30s?
Well, those days we had grocery stores, blacksmith shops, and churches. I even had to right 2 miles from my house was a Finnish church, North Van Etten Church, and had all of the things for Banfield Company could make harnesses for your horses, measure your horses and make the harnesses. And there were blacksmith shops like today there are car repair shops, dirt roads. Wintertime they were snow and summertime they were mud.
Okay. Did you have electricity?
No, didn't have electricity till 1936.
Okay.
So
do you remember the process by which they installed the electricity? Was it?
Well, they put the electric lines in finally in 1936. Before that we had kerosene and wood stoves for cooking, wood stoves for heating, and used kerosene for the lamps.
Okay. So how long did you live in Van Etten? You were saying earlier that you had lived there until after you retired in the 70s.
Well, I lived there till I was 23 years old. I lived on a farm, and those days we had to walk. We walked. It was a mile. The grade schools were all 2 miles apart, so nobody had to walk over a mile.
Mm-hmm. So you went to grade school. Did you attend high school?
Yes, I attended high school in Van Etten, and by the time I went to school, we had a school bus. Seikonen had a school bus, and Owen Hill had a horse-drawn school bus. And but my brother was a little older than I. He walked 5 miles to high school one way. But by the time I went, Seikonen had a school bus, and we could ride the bus then. We didn't have to walk anymore. That was for high school. And then after I got through high school in Van Etten, I went to EBI in Elmira.
So that would be EBI Elmira Business Institute?
Yes.
Okay, what did you study there?
Well, we studied mostly, you learned to work in the banks and bookkeeping and all that, you know.
Okay.
I had a room was $4 a week, and I worked in the restaurant 5 hours a day for my meals. Saturday and Sunday I didn't have to work, but I got my meals in the restaurant.
Okay.
In that restaurant on Water Street.
So you were living in Elmira while you were attending EBI?
I rented a room for $4 a week.
Okay. So was that just like at a hotel, or was that like an apartment?
No, it's just a private home.
Oh, okay. Like a...
Those days, Elmira was a boom town, and if you had extra rooms, you could rent it to usually working people.
Okay.
And in 1941, the war started, and the doctor in Van Etten passed me for physical. They sent me 3 times on a bus to Binghamton. They always turned me down. And remember, the doctor said, "Young man, if you don't get the heart fixed, you won't be here long."
Well, there's irony for you.
So then, 1943, I left the farm and she went to work in a factory in Elmira. I rented a room there and worked in the factory.
Which factory?
In appendix. It was Bendix that time. Now it's motor components.
Okay. So what did you manufacture at
Well,
Bendix?
we manufactured automobile parts.
Mm-hmm.
We had the patent for Bendix driver, the hand that cranks your car.
Ah.
We got 60 cents a piece for them when we send them carloads to factories, and 3 miles down the street at Ritter's, they cost $13.85. The factory got 60 cents.
Hmm.
That's how much the markup was.
Wow.
But I can always tell people that I was 4F, which means I wasn't physically fit to be in the Army. And here I am, almost 102 years old. They're all dead and I'm still alive.
Well, maybe that's partly because you didn't end up having to go. So you worked at the factory, and how long did you work at the factory for?
Well, I retired in 1972 when I was 52 years old. I've been retired longer than I've worked. We came out with a new contract, and that time the most I ever made was $4 an hour. But the following year we got a new contract, and I was already retired, and the same job paid $20 an hour.
Oh, it made you think about going back, or not really?
The government always says no inflation.
So after you retired, what did you do then?
Well, I had some houses in Elmira, apartment, houses that been made into apartments. Mainly I had that. And then we still had the farm, a different farm, Dr. Canfield's place in the village. And we had 3 apartments in that. So I was always busy taking care of those places.
Okay, so you said we. Did you have like a family in addition to yourself, or?
Yeah, yes, I got married in 43 and had 3 children.
Okay.
2 boys and 1 girl. They're up on the walls here.
Ah, yes. So when did you move here to Horseheads?
Well, had a house on Lake Street in Elmira, and Elmira got to be so bad I moved to Horseheads in '82. So I am now.
Okay. So you were here in 1972. Let's talk about the thing that happened in 1972. Did the flood impact you at all?
Yes, we had a few inches of water in the cellar.
Okay. And was that at the Lake Street home, or was?
Yes.
Okay.
And when I lived in Benetton, I taught accordion at home. I worked in a factory, plus we had cows. And then after I moved to Elmira, I still repaired accordions. Because if you can do something nobody else can do, you meet new people all the time.
Okay.
And I played for entertainment, but now I can't anymore because my fingers are all bent. So.
Okay.
Could I ask, when you first started playing accordion, how did you learn that?
Well, I was self-taught. I never studied under a teacher for music, but I took music lessons in Benetton on orchestra bells. It was the first time that we had music teachers in Benetton. So I learned a little bit about music there, but I learned self-taught on accordion.
So what made you get into playing the accordion?
Well, those days there was a lot of foreigners, Finnish people around Benetton, and everybody played a buttons accordion. So every house had a banjo, accordion, piano.
Mm-hmm.
But anymore they don't. After radios and TVs came on, why they all died out. People don't play instruments at home anymore.
Did your mom or dad play the accordion?
My father played accordion,
Oh,
played the whole Finn tunes. And my mother played organ, had a pump organ. I can remember her playing a pump organ.
And did your dad teach you the old Finnish tunes? Did you learn old Finnish tunes from your dad?
But no, my father just played just from memory, by ear we call it.
What did he?
They never, those old timers never took lessons on anything. They just learned them by themselves.
Wow.
so I understand that for a number of years you've been associated with the Finger Lakes Finns Association in the area. How did you get involved with that?
Well, I know most of the people that belonged to it. Those days you knew all your neighbors for 10 miles around.
Mm-hmm.
Today you don't know your next door neighbor anymore. But everybody had some kind of instruments at home. That's the old days when they had square dancing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I met my wife in the old barn, Woodhall's old barn on in between Horseheads and Elmira.
Okay.
Banana had a Finnish dance hall. Spencer had a Finnish dance hall. Those days, Saturday nights, all the farmers come to dances.
So did you grow up speaking Finnish or?
I learned to read and write Finnish.
Okay, were your parents first generation or second generation immigrants or?
My father and mother both came from Finland.
Okay. So they.
My mother died when she was only 48, but father lived to 83. Those days you could go to a thing called rippikoulu in church, and they teach you.
Huh.
So that in Finland, I'd write to them in Finn. You know, write it in Finn so they could. But they said, if you want to, just write it in English, because we got people how to translate it for them.
I wondered if you, when you started school with.
I was 5 years old when I started.
Yeah. Now,
Walk a mile through the snow.
Oh.
In those days, you had to walk the fields and even drive the horses along fields because the roads were dug roads. They were lower than the field. That was the days of the snow fences. Today, you don't never see snow fences.
So what is a snow fence?
The snow. Do you ever see snow fences?
No.
Well, they're wooden. You can still buy them, and they use them for in construction or close off roads and like that. But they had the snow fence so the snow wouldn't fill the road up.
Oh.
But the roads were low. Today the roads are higher than the field, so the snow blows off the road.
I was wondering if when you went to school, if you spoke Finnish.
Like in school?
Well,
When you
our North Manhattan school, even our teacher, Wilma Loma, was born in Finland, born in this country. We were all Finns except Russell Henderson. He was the only Yank in the whole school. We're all Finlanders.
So did you know English? Did she have to teach you English
Well,
when you started school?
I learned English because I had a sister and brother that were a little older, so I learned to speak English at home. But I didn't learn to read and write. Nobody learned to read and write till they went to school. But even our teacher was a Finlander.
Okay. So what church did you attend up in Van Etten?
Well, there was a Lutheran church. It's still there. Next Sunday we're going to have the party there. And the cemetery is pretty near all Finlanders, and I knew most of them. Because when my father and I were in the meat business, I'd go around buying cows and chickens from all the farmers, so I knew all the farmers. All those people in that cemetery, I can remember when they were farmers.
So your father had a meat business.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
He went to Germany, from Finland, to learn the meat business at Hamburg, and his title was sausage maker because before electricity, when they butchered anything, they had to prepare the meat so they wouldn't spoil,
Mm-hmm.
and either make sausages, and that was his trade. And all his life he was in demand in meat markets because he knew how to make the good German-style sausages. He had to learn Yiddish language in Germany because the Jews owned everything, and he never learned the German language, but he learned the Jewish Yiddish language.
Okay. So you helped him with that? What was your role in that?
Well, I usually went around the country and buy the livestock, and he worked weekends at Atwater's on State Street in Ithaca, because he was in demand because he could make all those sausages.
Okay. What do you think some of the big changes are between when you were growing up and now?
Well, in the old days, of course, yeah, you traveled with you had horses, and you put in there, prepared your own food that you raised yourself. Today you buy your food from, nobody hardly has a garden anymore, but those days farmers raised their own food. All they had to buy in the old days was maybe salt and spices and things that you couldn't grow on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
So did your parents come from Finland to Van Etten?
Father came from Yukon, mother came from Joensuu. My mother's name was Anna Piiparainen. And today, whenever they ask me on the phone, what was your mother's name, I said, Anna Piiparainen. That's about the only question they ask. They figure if I know that, and they ask you for the identification, what color is your car, and all that.
Yeah. Okay.
Why did they? So when they came from Europe, why did they come to this part of the United States?
Well, they didn't come to this part first. They usually, all the foreigners settled in the New England states where they had clothing factories,
Mm-hmm.
and then they got jobs in coal mines, and there was work for them. There was plenty of work, and the women, they got jobs as houseworkers, I know Father said that the rich women were right at the docks, hire the girls as soon as they got off the boat and take them home, and they were worked at home. But then later on, the Finnish people all came from farms in Finland, and they wanted to be farmers. So my father went to East Chemung, Michigan, and worked in the meat markets there. But then they had farm salesmen and advertised them that was Van Etten, Spencer, and Trumansburg area. There were lots of farms for sale because after the factories opened up in the cities, those old-time original farmers packed up their suitcases and moved to the city, and there was all these empty farms reasonable. The Finnish people came and bought those farms and made their living off the farm.
So when did your parents first end up in Chemung County?
My father, the records on in the courthouse shows that he purchased that farm in 1913. I don't know whether he moved there right away. I remember him saying that when they crossed the Niagara River, the train stopped so you could look at the falls, Niagara Falls.
Oh.
And those days, if you wanted to go from Van Etten to Elmar, anywhere, you had to ride the train because Van Etten had railroad station, and you didn't drive the horses to town because it's too far. You ride the train.
Okay. So what made your parents leave Finland?
Well, I think times were hard because those days the old timers used to say that the people in Finland actually starved to death, and all those foreign countries, they were glad to come to America because America was new and there was plenty of work.
Okay. So you had some older siblings. How many siblings did you have?
Well, I had one brother and that was older than I, and a sister that was older than I, and one sister that was younger than I.
Okay. And were they all born in Chemung County too?
All born at home those days.
Okay. Was there like a midwife that had attended, or was it just, you know, like women in the community who helped out, or?
I don't know, but I know we were all born at home. They used to have an old saying that on a farm, you're born in a sauna and you die in a sauna.
So, you had a sauna.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
All the Finnish people had a sauna before they had a house. If they had to build a house and barn, they built a sauna and live in the sauna. And then they could do the cooking and the heat in the sauna, and they'll build your house and barn later.
Okay.
When did you use the sauna? Like how often a week? Maybe?
Well, usually you have sauna once a week, and sometimes neighbors come to sauna too. And we have a hunting camp, and now we have a sauna there. And when Gloria was alive, why, we'd have about 12 people come for sauna night Saturday.
Okay. So could you tell us a little bit about how that goes?
Well, sauna, you have a fireplace with the gravel stones. You don't put some flat stones in for the heat. They have round stones, and you heat the oven, and you got shelves to sit on and wash, and you throw water on the stones, and that's called löyly.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even see the löyly. You don't see the steam because it's so hot in the sauna. But if you hadn't been in sauna for a while, the epidermis, your outer skin actually rolls right off you. And you're brand new. The old skin rolls right off in the heat.
Okay. And so you just sweat and your skin rolls off, and you're clean.
Did you do the thing with birch branches? Is it?
Well, they had a vita. They took branches off a apple tree or birch tree or something and make those vitas. We didn't use them much. The old timers, they used to beat themselves with that sauna. With that, called it a vita. It's like a switch.
And in the winter time, did you go out in the snow after the
No,
sauna?
we didn't. I guess today they like to have a pond and dump in a pond, but those days they didn't.
So with the sauna, was it like a men's shift and a women's shift, or did everyone just sauna together?
Well, I remember when I was little, my mother would go to sauna with us, and she'd wash you up and get that soap in your eyes. Boy, that would really burn.
Okay. So was that your primary bathing? Like you didn't also have
The Finnish people didn't have bathrooms or showers in the house. They had sauna, and usually the men went in the sauna. A bunch of men go at it together, and the women they'd go. Yeah. But the whole family would go.
Okay. Do you have any particular stories that you would like to share about your life?
Well, I remember one time 2 state troopers came on horseback, and they must have came to find out where somebody lived, information. But I can always remember that those days you're kind of afraid of the police, that there's got trouble. And they came on horseback, so they must have come from Waverly, because I think that would have been the closest trooper barracks.
So when was that about, do you think?
Well, they wanted to know where somebody lived, I think.
Yeah, but when about did that happen?
I don't know. I don't know. Probably in the 20s.
Okay.
So you were living in
the highways were so bad, you couldn't go only by horses. You couldn't go. They had automobiles, but you usually put them away for the winter. because it was snow. In the summertime it was mud, so you had to have good weather for you to drive in the summertime.
How old do you think you were when state troopers? How old were you when they came on horseback?
Well, I was probably, well, if it was in the 20s, I was born in 21, so I had to have been probably 6, 7 years old.
Okay. So about when did they pave the roads?
Well, they didn't pave them. I don't remember. It had to be in the late 30s when they finally made into blacktop roads.
Okay. So they electrified in the 30s and they paved in the 30s.
Yes.
How did paving and electrification change the community, do you think?
Well, they usually built the roads a little higher than they hauled all them gravel out of the creeks and stuff, built the roads a little higher so the roads didn't get plugged up with snow so much, and they were gravel roads first, and then later on they made it into blacktop.
Okay. So how did that change things for the people who were living in Van Etten?
Well, people would buy Model T Ford cars,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd have, I know my brother would take the neighbors who didn't have a car to town to buy their groceries. They paid him 50 cents to take them to town.
Okay.
Right.
So you guys got your family got your first car sometime in the 1930s?
Well, my father bought a brand new chassis in 1924. I can remember Nestor Erickson drove it home for him because my father never learned to drive. But they brought the truck. It was just a hood and a frame. Later on, Heartbeats, the blacksmith, made the box, and they had a factory cab. Must be they brought the cab from the factory later and put it on later.
Okay. So he had a car, but he didn't know how to drive it.
So he always had to, well, they never drove that very much, even after they jumped to, when shift cars came in style, Model Ts weren't, Model Ts only had low and high, but the other cars had low, second, and high. Why, Model Ts, you could buy Model Ts for $5 or $10 that were perfect cars,
Mm-hmm.
but they'd rather have the Model A's, because Model A's would go 60 miles an hour. Model T Ford, the top speed was 20.
Ah. Okay. So cars came, the roads improved in the 1930s. Electricity came in the 1930s. How did electricity change your life?
Well, I don't know, before they wired the houses, I went to the meeting because my brother was older than I, but father always thought he was kind of bashful, so I had to go to the meeting because my father worked in Ithaca and he stayed there all week. But the electric company came and a contractor came, and we had to agree that everybody would put electric. Cost 100, and the contractor, and you had to hire that contractor, and he wired them all for $150 for the house. But you only had a light and a ceiling, and you had no floor plugs because you had nothing to plug into them. But later on, my sister worked in Ithaca in a Monarch restaurant, and she made enough money. She bought us a brand new Norge refrigerator. Then we had to put an extension cord to that ceiling light to get electric for it.
Okay.
Didn't have floor plugs like today because you had nothing to plug in them.
So you got a new refrigerator. How did that affect how you lived?
Well, before that you had to put your gallon of water down in the well to cool it, keep it cool. But after refrigerator, first thing we ever bought, and that's about the only thing I remember. But then later on, radios came in, and of course televisions are just very recent. They put the television still during World War II when people started getting TVs.
Mm-hmm.
Could I ask about meal times? Like, what were meal times like when you were growing up? when you had breakfast or lunch or dinner, what was mealtime like?
Well, those days when you had a hired man, you had to have supper at 6 o'clock, and I don't know for sure what time he ate, but noon was 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock you ate the meal, and 6 o'clock was supper, and breakfast I think was anywhere between 6 and 8.
Okay. So what kind of things were you eating?
Well, potatoes mainly. Even in the Finn papers, you say, better neither for breakfast, better neither for noon, and better neither for supper.
So did you grow potatoes on your farm?
See, in the olden days, the women never worked away from home, and they had to can enough food for the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So you had big shelves in the cellar full of canned food. And everybody raised big garden, beets and carrots and potatoes. Potatoes are the main thing, and you raise potatoes to sell also. I remember one time Isaac Belden there was a dealer from New York City came up buying potatoes, and he sold him 1,000 bushel of potatoes for 10 cents a bushel. He gave him a check for $100, and the check was no good. It bounced.
Oh, brutal. So your father worked in Ithaca, and he was there for most of the week. So
he'd come home and he'd take the train, and then walk home from the railroad station, Van.
Okay.
Usually on Sunday.
So who was doing most of the farm work? Was that you and your brother, or was that the farm hands?
After my mother died, Mrs. Kirkus came and kept house for us, and she had 3 children, two are still school age. In those days, it was so easy to get a housekeeper because there were so many miners' widows that needed a home. They had children, so they moved right in, and just like your mother, do everything your mother did.
Okay.
Because I know Pilikas in Spencer, there were 6 brothers, and they were all different last names. He said my mother was married 6 times because the miners didn't live to be 29 years old. By 29, they were dead from accidents of mine and sickness. And so there are all these miners' widows that they were glad to get a home for their children.
Okay. So you had the housekeeper. Who was doing the farm work?
Well, we had father used to have 2 or 3 hired men because he made $25 a week, and the hired men got $2 a week in their room and board.
Okay. So what was your relationship like with the hired men, but also the housekeeper and the children?
They were all just like family. I know in the evening you had big dining room and play cards in the evening, and the children we played all those Finnish games that I don't remember even how to play them. And little children and men all around the table there. And the neighbors, hired men, they'd come to our house usually, and that was a big entertainment, and it was educational playing those games.
What kinds of card games did you play? Do you remember?
Well, I remember Luck Beyond Notre Dame, some of those Finn names. I don't remember a thing of how to play them. And people played a lot of solitary.
Mm-hmm.
But today, I don't even remember how to play solitary.
I was curious, you said potatoes for breakfast, potatoes for lunch, and potatoes for supper.
That was in the Finger Lakes Finnish magazine about that one day.
Yeah. Well, and your dad was a butcher, and he made sausage. Did he bring sausage home for your family?
Yeah, everybody had the meat. You either had to can it or know how to prepare it in the sausage seeds, like Amish people still do. They can hang in the meat markets. They had all those sausages hanging off the ceiling, and you didn't even have to refrigerate them; they wouldn't spoil.
Okay. And then you're eating out of the garden that you have. So you've got beets and you've got carrots, and what other kinds of things was
Beets, potatoes. I don't remember, but everybody had a pretty big garden.
Rutabaga? Did you have rutabaga? Rutabaga?
I don't know.
Okay. Was there much dairying going on, or was it mostly
Well,
crops?
Those days, everybody had cattle, maybe 5, 6 milk cows, and they'd take the milk to their milk station in the village. And then in the late 30s, chickens got to be the main income. You had a lot of chickens, and they got rid of, just kept one family cow, sell the cows, and then they made their living raising chickens.
So was that chickens for eggs or chickens for the meat market?
You bought little chicks, and after they got a little bigger, you sold the eggs, and usually every year they sold the chickens and bought new chickens again, and you buy the little chicks.
Okay.
They had the brooder stoves, and you had a special brooder house where you had the little chickens until they got bigger. Then after their chickens got bigger, you separated the roosters from the hens, and they sold the roosters for meat.
Mm-hmm.
Broilers, fryers, and the older hens were either stewing chickens or the heavy hens like the brown and red. They were heavy hens, and they were roasting chickens. But the white leghorns, they were stewing chickens.
Okay.
Like chicken soup, and real popular. The Finnish people ate a lot of chicken soup.
Hmm.
In those days, you make potato soup too. You don't even get that anymore. The best best stew ever was a lamb stew.
Mm-hmm. Was there a lot of sheep rearing, or
No, farmers didn't have sheep much, but the old Yankees, they had sheep.
Okay.
I was wondering about bread. Did your mother?
Well, rye bread was the main thing. The farmers would raise wheat and rye, and you could take your wheat and rye to the feed mill, and they'd grind it up and make regular bread flour. So you actually raise your own flour, and all the meat markets, all the stores. Hello?
Okay. We were talking about bread and food and what kind of things you were eating.
Well, those days the women made really good desserts like pies and cakes.
Okay.
And you had those wood cook stoves. I think they bake better than the modern stoves.
So where were you getting your wood?
Well, everybody had a wood lot, and you'd do like they do today, cut the big ones, take them to the sawmill, make boards, and then the branches and the crooked ones used for firewood.
Okay. So you had like a plot of trees that you would cut down every so often.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you then replant?
No, the woods just grew by themselves, seems like.
Okay.
Of course, when you had cattle the cattle could go in the woods too, and they'd eat all the brush there. You could look right through the woods. There was no brush. Because when the little weeds would start coming, the brush start growing, the cows ate the leaves off them. And so you had real pretty woods. You could look right through the woods.
Okay.
Today, it's all brush. You can't even walk through.
So what kind of responsibilities did you have on the farm?
Well, mine job every night after I come home from school, I had to gather the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger boys, they'd take care of the cows and horses, and that heavy stuff. Of course, in the summertime, the women even helped in the hay fields because they put the hay in loose. So it took a lot. a lot of work to put the hay in. Today they have machinery that bales it up and one man does it all alone. Those days you had a couple of men on each side of the wagon throwing the hay on, and I had to drive horses when I was little, so they'd give the little boys a job to sit up on top of the load and drive the horses.
Okay. So you had hay fields, wheat fields, rye fields, potatoes, and a vegetable garden, plus cows and chickens.
And we had a great big apple orchard too. Father said when he bought it, it was a brand new orchard.
Mm-hmm.
So we had all different varieties, probably 30, 40 trees, all different varieties. And I remember down the cellar they had bins, so the different varieties of potatoes were in different bins. And the cellars all had to have a dirt floor
Mm-hmm.
to keep fruit and vegetables better, because when you have a concrete floor, it doesn't keep the fruit don't keep so good.
Okay. So was the cellar below the house? Was it next to the house?
Yeah, under the house, yeah.
Okay. And I imagine it must have been quite big to keep everything.
Yeah, the cellar was same size as your house, and it had stone walls laid up with stone.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, when they invented concrete, cement, then they'd have somebody plaster them and make them smooth. But before they were just stone walls.
Okay. Can you tell me anything else about the farm you think I should know?
Well, there was a lot, but I'm getting so old I forget stuff.
Okay.
I was wondering if you picked berries at all,
Oh,
or
well,
mushrooms.
berries. My sister and I would go berrying, and you have those big milk pails. In no time, you fill them right up, because the pastures in the fields are just full of strawberries and raspberries, great big blackberries, and our housekeeper, Mrs. Kirkus, would can them up, and you have all these cans of berries. Today, there's no more berries in the woods or fields. Nobody raised. I don't never remember about the only thing they did have rhubarb that grew by every year came up, but they never had tame berries because there was so much nice big wild berries,
Mm-hmm.
and they're better tasting than the tame ones.
Yeah.
Did you hunt for mushrooms?
Well, they had a lot of mushrooms too, but I never learned how to know the poisonous ones from the. But some people, I know that the Russian boys in the city, they said they always go on a East Hill and get mushrooms, because the woods were full of mushrooms, and they seem to know how to pick the good ones.
Yeah, and that's the trick, because otherwise you pick the wrong ones, you're gonna end up dead.
Yeah.
So, wow, I forgot what I was gonna say. So you lived on the farm until you went to the business school, and then were you also living on the farm while you were working at the factory, or were you living in Elmira?
Well, I lived in another place in Canfield Estate in a village of Etten for a while, but I also lived in Elmira then later.
Okay. So, can you tell me a little bit about Elmira in the 40s, 50s, 60s when you were living there?
Well, I know when I went to EBI, they just got rid of the streetcars. They were taking up the streetcar tracks and the buses. You had buses, you didn't need a car.
Mm-hmm.
The city people, only time on Sunday they backed the car up and wash up, go for a ride in the country, because you could catch the bus. For 5 cents you could ride the bus, and buses went to your factory, and they ran them when the factory hours closed up. Buses were there, and they stopped at every street corner. So you didn't need, and people walked a lot. They didn't think anything of walk a mile or two to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Were you here you were here for the 1946 flood as well as the 1972 flood?
We had 2 floods, yeah. We were lucky. We only had water in the cellars a little bit.
Okay, and that was for both floods?
Yeah.
Where did you live in Elmira?
Well, I remember Gloria was working in Remington Road on South Side, and we lived on the West 3rd Street at that time, and they had to walk the railroad tracks to come home because the streets were flooded. But somehow they got home from Remington Road to North Side, walked the railroad track.
Okay.
Wow.
That sounds dangerous, but probably less dangerous than walking through flooded streets.
Well, as high as those concrete walls all along the river, the water came right over them.
Wow.
So, anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, there's a lot of things, but I don't remember when I'm laying down sleeping. I can't sleep. I think of the olden days.
Well, we don't want to wear you out, but I wondered a little more about the music. So, you got interested in playing the accordion yourself. Your dad played at home, and you taught yourself. And then, as you got older, did you meet other people who played music? Or?
Well, I got from Petroderos in New York City. They always send song sheets of the new sheets of music and different wholesale places. And I'd order accordions for my students, and I remember the freight from New York City to Manhattan was $2.25 on a train.
So you had students who you were teaching accordion. When did you start
Well,
teaching?
I had as high as 43 students,
Okay.
and I teach one at a time, sometimes two, maybe, And the Elmira had 7 or more accordion teachers. When Myron Florin and Lawrence Welk first came on, everybody wanted to learn how to play accordion, and they didn't teach it in school. So I'd get all these students that were going to school, they all wanted to learn the accordion.
Okay.
So I'd work in a factory night shift, and I'd teach accordion at 3 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the afternoon when school let out.
So, how old were you when you started teaching accordion? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember for sure, but probably around 25, 30, somewhere in there.
And were most of your students high school kids, or were they?
All different. I had grown-ups even, older people, yeah.
Okay.
We had that big house in Manhattan, so I had music room, and the parents would usually come and also and visit and listen to you teaching the students,
Was that your mom and dad's house in Van Etten, the big house?
No, my mother died when I was only 7 years old, and father never learned music from notes or reading notes or anything like that.
But
I learned a little bit about music when I went to high school, because we had first time in Van Etten ever we had a symphony orchestra, so you had to learn notes.
Okay. So you're a member of the Finger Lakes Finns. Rusty, who is here doing the interview with me, is the president of the Finger Lakes Finns?
Currently, I'm the secretary.
Okay,
Yeah,
is the secretary.
I don't go over there. I think they only have once a week, maybe, in the winter. Well,
Once a month.
I know when I was little, I remember Mother taking us to horse and buggy on Johannes. And they had all these horses and wagons, and they had barns where you drove the horse in a barn, even in the villages, the grocery stores. They had a place where you could drive your horse in a shelter.
Okay.
I know Father said if he wanted to go to Waverly, he'd go to Van Etten, buy the groceries, put them in the wagon, drive the horses in the shelter, take the train to Waverly, and come back home. And nobody ever stole anything, and nobody stole anything that didn't belong to them.
Okay.
I know when the Finnish orchestra students from Finland came to Van Etten, exchange students, they said they wondered what was in those lockers. And they said, that's where we keep our clothes. They said, why do you have locks on them? So the people don't steal them. And the Finnish children said, you mean they'd take stuff that didn't belong to them?
Hmm.
And Amish people today, they have everything hung on hooks. They don't worry about anybody taking them if they don't belong to them.
So you mentioned that your mother would take you to Johannes. Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Well, I think it's usually almost along. I'm not sure whether it's the 21st or 24th. You probably do, Johannes. It's a religious holiday, but we don't think of it as religious. It's just like Christmas. It's almost like Christmas.
But in the summer, so it's on the longest day of the year.
June 24th, I think, really.
So what do you do on it? How's it celebrated?
Well, when we went to that Johannes picnic, you had chicken soup was the main dish, and you had homemade cake with wild strawberries, layer cake.
Mm-hmm.
Wild strawberries dessert, and chicken soup for the main dish.
Okay. And so it was like a big community picnic?
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
Had the tables outdoors. That church is there now. Next Sunday we're going to have some kind of, because at Kettley's Green Acres was a rainy day and we didn't go because it was raining hard here, but Richard Winky said he went and it didn't rain there, but it rained every place else, so I think that's why we're having one now next Sunday.
Ah.
So, did you go to Johannes at the church?
We did in the old days.
Oh.
Yeah, it was outdoors. Everybody came. We could hear the church. We were 2 miles from the church, and when the wind was from the north, we could hear the church bells ringing 2 miles away.
Is there anything else you would like to share about your life?
No, I think I've told most of them.
All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us today.